Okay, so Jay Baba, just a few of us here.
Jay
So
Baba?
the topic today is we are not separate from God. And it's actually going to build upon what we've already talked about in a few previous sections. By the way, do you hear any echo on my end here?
I hear echo.
Yeah.
I don't know from where.
Okay.
Maybe we could all mute unless we're going to talk.
Let's see, is this better? Did the echo go away?
Nope.
I'm hearing it pretty clear, actually.
Okay.
I hear you well.
No echo? I mean, like this, or was it better?
Better. Is this better now? No?
No.
I hear echo.
Okay. I'll just take that off. Okay.
Better.
So,
I still heard an echo.
oh, really?
It might be me.
I hear you fine, Richie.
Okay, good.
Either way.
Very good. So we'll start again. If Angela's going to put this on the YouTube, she'll edit this part out. So just to let everyone know, these are going to be video. That means they're recorded as we're doing the meeting. So if you don't want to be recorded, you can black yourself out. If you're okay with it, that's fine. Does anyone have any problem right now? Leica, we don't have video for you, and Marge, of course, you set your video off for the time being. So is everyone okay with it being recorded? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so today the topic is we are not separate from God. And it's basically building upon what I've talked about and we've discussed in the previous meetings and showing how these different themes all fit together. So I'm also going to talk a little bit why these themes are important for me and how they fit into my personal relationship with Baba. And we're also going to look at how they are unified. These various themes are really not separate, but they're just different perspectives on the same thing. Okay. So if people would like to read, if you feel comfortable reading, Marvin, do you want to go ahead and read this first?
Sure. I will tell you all with my divine authority that you and I are not we, but one. You unconsciously feel my avatarhood within you. I consciously feel in you what each of you feel. Thus, every one of us is avatar, in the sense that everyone and everything is everyone and everything at the same time and for all time. Mayor Baba's Call, September 1954.
Thank you. And go ahead, you can read these short ones here.
I am closer to you than your very breath.
So this comes from a story. I couldn't find it, or Baba may have actually said it, but Erich tells a story why Baba explained why he's silent. And Erich would tell this story often in Mondley Hall. And so that's where I found it.
I think I've come across that statement too in places.
Okay, great. Okay, and here's one more.
The only real existence is that of the one and only God, who is the self in every finite self. The only real knowledge is the knowledge that God is the inner dweller in good people and in so-called bad, in saint and in so-called sinner. From the Seven Realities, Discourses.
So we see from these various quotes that Baba makes it very clear that we have all God within us, and he is conscious of all. And so we'll do one more quote here, Marvin.
Infinite consciousness is infinite. Thus, it can never lessen at any point in time or space. Infinite consciousness, being infinite, includes every aspect of consciousness. Unconsciousness is one of the aspects of infinite consciousness. Thus, infinite consciousness includes unconsciousness. It sustains, covers, pierces through, and provides an end to unconsciousness, which flows from and is consumed by infinite consciousness. In order to assert infinite consciousness unequivocally, I declare that I have infinite consciousness. And I can do this most emphatically because I am infinite consciousness. I am everything and I am beyond everything. Mayor Bob. Oh, here we go. I am ever conscious that I am in you, while you are never conscious that I am in you. Daily I support you and share your consciousness. Now I want you to uphold me and share my consciousness one day. Man being unconscious of actually possessing the never-ending conscious experience that God is everything and all else is nothing, feels everything is. Air is, water is, fire is, earth is, light is, darkness is, stone is, iron is, vegetation is, insect is, fish is, bird is, beast is, man is. Good is, bad is, pain is, pleasure is. Thus, there is no end to all that is until he arrives at nothing is and instantaneously realizes that God is.
Thank you, Marvin. And that's from Mayor Bob's call, which he gave in September 54, I believe. And that's from Lord Mayor. You can find it. And it's in other sources, of course, as well. And what you see here is that, again, Baba is reiterating he's ever conscious that he is in us. We're not conscious that he's in us, but he's conscious, and he wants us to one day uphold and share his consciousness. And a way of getting there eventually is to realize that nothing is. And when realizing that nothing is, one realizes that God is. We're going to see how that all fits together into these themes. So the question arises, given that we are one with God, how can we realize God? And we have looked at some pathways to God, which Baba presents, and the three previous meetings. And what I believe is that although the pathways offer different perspectives, they're really the same one process. There's only one real thing happening, and in the most abstract sense, it's a process of God moving from his unconscious state to becoming conscious of himself. So what we've spoken about in the previous sessions have been things like the nature of consciousness and the need to still the mind, imagination, the role of imagination along the spiritual path, nirvana as a state just prior to the realization of God, and it's how it's a state of not really the realization of nothingness, and the role of surrendering one's free will, and how free will, we just looked at how free will really is an illusion, and how what we need to do is surrender our belief in free will, the illusion of free will, by surrendering to Baba. So what I have here is these various stages, and again, in a very abstract bird's eye view of it, where we have God in the beyond state, God everything, wanting to become conscious of himself. And the only thing he can imagine being other than himself, which is his unified infinite state, is absolute nothingness. And it's out of the nothingness that the entire evolution takes place, culminating in human consciousness. And then human beings reincarnate. They go through the spiritual path to eventually arrive at experiencing nirvana, which was really the state of original nothingness. And then immediately thereafter, realizing God, which is infinite consciousness. So we're going to take a look at this process. And basically, this is just a reiteration going from infinite unconsciousness to human full and complete consciousness through the role of nirvana, where consciousness plays the role of God, or God actually playing that role of consciousness in that one stage. And God, the soul goes through the evolution of consciousness, gets full and complete consciousness, and then, as I say, humans can then venture on the spiritual path to realizing God. So each of these various themes have a certain continuity to them. And here, I'm showing how imagination is a continuity from God's imagination, which creates the universe and the illusion of, which is the universe. There's human imagination, and then there's imagination along the spiritual path. Likewise, there's a continuity of will. There's God's will, there's human will, and then there's the surrenderance of will that happens during the spiritual path. There's a continuity, what I say, continuity of desire. God's original whim for consciousness is the original desire. There's human desire, and then there's desire transmuted into longing for God. And there's a continuity of consciousness from infinite unconsciousness through evolution to full and complete consciousness and to the final stage of nirvana. Okay, Marge, would you like to read, or would you rather not read?
I'll read.
Okay. So it's just the what's on the bottom there.
Okay.
Mhm.
When the nothing first became manifested as nothingness in the shape of creation, the primal manifestation of the nothing gave rise to the first trace of consciousness in God.
Okay.
From God Speaks.
Mm-hmm. So we see the beginning of consciousness begins with the nothing. Okay, Marge?
In human form, the soul achieves full and complete consciousness. Therefore, the soul, having now gained full and complete consciousness in human form, does not need any more or any other higher forms to evolve consciousness. From God Speaks.
And so what I understand that to mean is the consciousness we have will be the consciousness we use along the spiritual path and in our realization of God. We don't need any more higher forms to evolve consciousness. Okay, and the final one, Marge?
Nirvana is the passing away in the absolute vacuum of the original God is state. From God Speaks.
Yeah, I'm sorry, there's be one more after this, but yeah, and fine. So it's passing away back into the original state of the original nothing, into the vacuum. Okay, what?
Nirvana is that state where apparently God is not. This is the only state where God is not and consciousness is. Only consciousness remains, experiencing absolute vacuum. God
And
Speaks.
thank you. And that absolute vacuum is the original nothing. Okay, so we see that theme of consciousness here playing out through these different stages. Now we'll look at the continuity of imagination. Leica, would you like to read those quotes on the bottom?
Am I humming?
Yeah. Uh-huh. That's a nice tune.
No, I'll pass. Well,
Okay.
I've been having trouble with the mic and I can't hear it, so I don't know how bad it is.
It's not a humming, it's like a sweet ringing.
Oh, how weird. I don't know what that is. So is it okay to read?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, go ahead.
Even during the evolutionary period, the universe is in itself nothing but imagination.
Okay. So it's nothingness and it's illusion, and that's what it's all imagination.
The ego consciousness has crystallized out of the working of the manifold false imagination. The entire structure of the ego, which has been built during the period of the false working of imagination.
So we see that even our own consciousness is the result of the working of imagination. It's crystallized imagination.
Meditation should be spontaneous and not forced. In the moments of the surging up of divine impulses, imagination should be let loose and allowed to soar. The flight of the imagination should be controlled only by the set purpose of becoming one with the infinite. It should not be influenced by the currents of the diverse feelings of lust, greed, or anger.
So here we see how human imagination can be employed. So what I'm suggesting is that there's a continuity. We have God's imagination, human imagination, and then how what Baba describes the spiritual path itself is a path through imagination. Okay, Lynn, would you like to read this? Now we're going to move on to the theme of will and how look at how there might be a continuity of will throughout these various stages. Thank you,
I
Lynn.
alone am, excuse me, I alone am real, and my will governs the cosmic illusion. It is the truth when I say that the waves do not roll and the leaves do not move without my will.
So even from the very beginning, God's will has been employed through the entire evolutionary process. This is, of course, Baba speaking as the avatar, but it applies that God's will is functioning throughout the evolutionary process.
The ego is an affirmation of separateness. It takes many forms. It may take the form of a continued self-conscious memory expressing itself in recollections like, I did this and I did that. I felt this and I felt that. I thought this and I thought that.
So human will, our experience is that we are the doer, we are doing these things, and it's the ego that makes us believe that we are doing all these things. So that's human will as expressed through the ego. And to get rid of the ego, Baba suggests the provisional ego.
So with the provisional ego, he does not think, I do this, but on the contrary, systematically develops the thought that through him, the master is really doing all that he does. For example, when he looks, he thinks, the master is looking. When he eats, he thinks, the master is eating. When he sleeps, he thinks, the master is sleeping.
So that's the process of beginning to wind down this belief in the illusion of self-will by surrendering our will to the master. And finally,
with the surrenderance of self-will and ego-centered imagination, there arises a true perception of the infinite worth of that which is.
okay. So now we'll look at the last continuity here, the continuity of desire. Marvin, should we come back to you? Oh, Marvin, I think you have to.
I forgot to mute me.
Yeah,
The whole process of evolution was an absolutely spontaneous outcome of the original infinite whim surging in the unconscious God to become conscious of his eternal and infinite existence. God speaks.
So the original desire traces back to the whim, God's desire to become conscious of his eternal and infinite existence. And the next desire is human desire. Okay, Marvin? It's, lust, greed, and anger. I'm sorry. And here's the quote.
Selfishness comes into existence owing to the tendency of the desires to find fulfillment in action and experience. It is born of fundamental ignorance about one's own true nature. Discourses.
And at this stage, desire gets transformed into love, then longing, then surrenderance. Love for God, love for the master, longing for the master is a higher level of love. And then surrenderance is the final height before God realization.
When through complete detachment, one reaches the state of wanting nothing, one taps the unfailing inner source of eternal and unfading happiness, which is not based upon the objects of the world, but is sustained by self-knowledge and self-realization. Discourses.
Okay. That basically is it. So the point being that there's really one process moving from the original beyond state, God's whim for wanting to become conscious, moving through imagining the nothing, imagining all of evolution, creating human form, human consciousness, and then the spiritual path, moving back through the original nothing back to God. And this is one process, but Bob explains it from a point of view. We just saw the one of desire. We saw the one of imagination, the process going through different stages of imagination, different stages of consciousness, different stages of will. And there are of course other themes too that Baba discusses. There's things like selfless service and devotion, and of course love. And so there are many different themes, but they all basically describe the same larger, when I'm looking at a larger overview of the process from God unconscious to God conscious. And so I'll just say for myself, these are important. It's an important understanding for me. For example, the fact that Baba says that he's infinite consciousness and that he is ever conscious of us. So this became important to me at some stage in my life. I would meditate according to how Baba describes how one should meditate in the discourses. At some point, I realized that if Baba has infinite consciousness, that means he's totally conscious of everything that I'm conscious of. He's even probably conscious of things about me that I'm unconscious of. And so when I experience my consciousness, I can share that consciousness. So I can understand that Baba is sharing that consciousness with me. So he is with me, one with me. And if I want to feel his presence, I only need to tune into my own consciousness, which would mean quieting the mind so that the mind is quiet, so that I can be aware of my own consciousness and not conscious of all the things that I would be thinking about or experiencing or feeling, but to center on the consciousness of Baba being present. Likewise, when Baba speaks about how to, we should feel free to allow our imagination to soar, to allow at these moments of meditation to allow my mind, my imagination to soar and feeling Baba's presence. Of course, it requires, just like the mind has to be stilled, it requires the discipline of lessening one's mind, lessening one's imagination to then, because if one uses self-will and imagination, that defeats the purpose, and that won't work. So likewise, I have to let go of my will, I have to let go of my desires for things in life. And when I employ all those things in meditation, then I'm able to feel Baba's presence. And that's transformative. And so that's why these various themes are important to me. So that's the presentation for today. And if anyone wants to add to it, feel free to do so. But just one at a time now.
Richie,
Yeah.
when you talked about nothing nirvana, I wondered what your thoughts about if that's what Jesus experienced as he felt abandoned by God because he was giving up everything.
Well, that's very interesting. I never thought of that. Of course.
And then, of course, he went into infinite consciousness.
Right. Of course, he was already God realized.
True.
Prior to that, but Baba did say he stationed himself on one of the planes. The avatar always stations themselves on a particular plane. I think Jesus was stationed, I believe, on the fourth plane, and that's why he was able to perform all those miracles, or why he did. That's stationed himself there, I should say, so he would be able to perform miracles. And so I guess you could say, perhaps, he was. How did you say that again? That state before he became free.
He felt abandoned by God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to add something to that. Baba said that Buddha made the mistake of not going any further in his explanation of who he was and what one has to go through. And what Marja said brought forth the feeling that Jesus realized, this is my talking, that mistake was what he made the last time he was here, in the human form. So being totally human in the context of sacrificing himself on the cross, his divinity, for me, wasn't prevalent at the time, in the sense that he was totally aware of who he was. And he gave into that, quote, weakness by pronouncing Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And collapsed and went into unconsciousness right after that. So I just wanted to put that in there as a possible explanation, but who knows?
Okay.
I actually read that Baba said that the avatar makes a conscious, perfect mistake each time he comes.
Mhm.
And he said that was Jesus's. So it had a reason, it had a purpose. I don't know, maybe it had something to do with spreading the message in the future, who knows, but that's what Baba said.
Well, it might be because he in that statement offset the previous mistake. So we don't know what Baba's mistake is until the next 700 years.
Right. Baba said he'd tell us the next time he comes.
And we can, with all the words being written down, I'm sure that this will all be carried forward. We probably could find what the mistake was even without him telling us in all of his writing. Someone would come up with it. I don't know. just his game is just too much. But look at the charts and all that. I wrote this poem actually because it fits what you're talking about, and it's the first poem in this book on the dialogues to the divine, with the divine, that I hopefully get published. And it's called The Infinite Passion of Life. There's no beginning and no end. Oh, beloved, when I call on you, as I do now, concerns clutch my heart. Furrows crease my brow, asking, where does one start? Who am I, this mote of dust? Someone who has this unbounded trust that you are my self-becoming, and that this life I lead to extinction is not succumbing. That I came from you and desire to go back. I pray this desire stays on permanent track, that in your time we'll be rejoined, that finally by you my heart has been purloined. Millennia untraceable have come and gone. The two of us together have played this song, yet always Maya working her perpetual con, I always figuring out the difference between right and wrong. Strange this happening in this stage of life, where love and desire are paramount despite the strife. To be united with you is all I care, so please take this mind, this soul, this heart laid bare. Infinite intelligence, the whim you are, who comes and goes as the avatar, and I, the bubble, always searching that star, desiring only to be pulled across illusion's bar. In response, O seeker to my abode, journeys of life and millions of trials, each untold, some worthy of name, know full well, no matter the amount, your goal is union. Let that desire remain paramount. Though many lives more may be in store, for you, this one chosen still remains in doubt. Until all other desires are put to rout, then union with me will be forevermore.
Nice, Jack.
Thank you. It kind of fits.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you. There's non-alcoholics.
Yeah, we don't have any rules.
Beck's, best non-alcoholic beer on the planet.
Yeah, I've been drinking vodka the whole time.
I can't.
Richie, your slides and displays are just exquisite. Thank you for all the trouble you went to.
Oh, thank you for saying that. Yeah, I enjoy doing it, and sometimes, you know, things evolve. So if I was starting out today to do these different topics that we started with in the beginning, I probably would have started with these slides because it's an overview, but it's something that I didn't really quite even have a total grasp of until having gone through all these different, preparing for these different meetings. And so then it occurred to me to put it all together through these set of slides today.
You mean you're learning along with us, huh?
Yeah. Yep.
Beautiful. You're a good teacher.
Ah, thank you. I never did like school, but thank you.
Got a lot of companion.
Yeah. Right.
Hey, Rich, I enjoy seeing your coming to Baba story.
Oh.
Yeah. Especially like the part how a kitty solved all the problems in 5 minutes.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, she really did. No, there was someone who could teach without teaching. Just being with Kitty was a wonderful process in itself, wonderful experience. I know many of us had that great opportunity.
What do you think she'd say about this whole process that you're teaching?
But you know, Kitty gave various talks, like at Amartithi and at Silence Day in the barn, and the night before Silence Day, obviously. And so she gave talks about consciousness and different topics. So she would think about these issues. And you know, there's a book, I forget the name of it now. One Fine Thread, is that? No, maybe not.
I think so. Yeah, a book of her talks.
Yeah. And so, you know, in spite of Kitty's seeming to be kind of flighty at times, you know, she couldn't remember people's names or would say the wrong words and so on. She actually was a deep thinker. And she pondered what consciousness was and what Baba meant by this quote that we read about wanting to, you know, one day share his consciousness. So, I'm not saying what she would think of mine, but I know she would enjoy thinking about these various topics. And I even remember hearing, I don't know if I heard it from her directly or someone telling me, she would spend some time in the morning and like to try to build upon the provisional ego, she would just sit still and move her hand a little bit and think Baba's moving her hand as a way to practice that building of the provisional ego. But of course, there's the other side of her where I think we all experience being in her office and just feeling Baba coming through her and with an incredible amount of love and understanding. Of course, true of all the Mandali in one way or another.
What did you say?
Oh, it was true of the Mandali, all of the Mandali in one way or another. You know, all the wonderful capacities and personalities, love. The one thing I didn't realize was how long or not how long the various slides would take. So this one was a little shorter than the other ones. So before we close, does anyone else want to add anything? Leica, do you want to have any comments before we close?
No, Richie, just to say thank you. And I thought I was admiring your slides too. Your presentation is beautiful.
Thank you. Helps add a little color.
Very nice. I was admiring your choices of color and design.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Well, coming from a
I
design,
think
professional designer, I think that is a compliment, real compliment. Thank you, Leica.
You're very welcome, sweetheart. Thank you for this. I'll have to catch up to the other ones that I'm glad they've been recorded.
Hi, Richard.
Oh,
Sorry,
hi. Oh, hi, Jeff.
Hi, Richard. Very, very nice to say hello to you. I didn't realize the meeting was going to be this short, and I'm sorry I'm late, but there were some wonderful questions. You may be able to answer me with wonderful insights. Because I've heard you teach a couple of times, and I had no idea you were going to kind of guide the share.
Yeah, Jeff, where are you located right now?
I live in a place called Amherst, Massachusetts.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Oh, Holyoke.
Yeah, where are you living, Richard?
Myrtle Beach.
Ah, you're very fortunate. Yeah, I've been
Yeah.
to the center. I've been to the center many times.
Mm-hmm.
My wife sometimes alone. Where to begin? Meditation. So my understanding of meditation, which I want you to correct from Baba's point of view, meditation is by being in his divine presence, saying his name, being with the breath, the holy breath. Thoughts come, thoughts go. Come back to the breath, letting go of the thoughts, letting go of the emotional connection with the thought, and practicing that not only when you're in formal meditation, but especially during the rest of the day, so that when something that would cause you to be reactive happens, which happens to all of us most of the time, at least once a day. Right, many times a day.
Mm-hmm.
This thing called reactivity, I feel from what I've been doing for many years, this reactivity is something very, very important to become the master of. I never quite put it that way. So, regarding meditation, as you practice it, and as you see Baba would encourage us to practice it, yes, very important to be with the love of Baba, with his name, in his name, surrounded by his name, breathing the love of Baba in, breathing the love of Baba out. As far as what I've said about working with reactivity to ultimately give one a much more peaceful time of equanimity, am I on the right track?
Sounds good to me. I don't think of myself as an expert, and I think everyone has their own unique pathway to Baba, and including meditation. Um, I think people may not even think of it being meditation, but I think if they're having an inner relationship to Baba, that's in a way a type of meditation. I think for me, the goal would be to establish an inner relationship and feeling of Baba's presence. So what you describe seems to fit right in with that. Baba talks about various aspects of meditation in the discourses and gives general guidelines. So, we could always look at that, but I think what really matters in the bottom line is, does this work for you? Is this, and that's, I think, what matters. And each person, Baba says meditation is a way of cutting through the mind, like walking through a forest, making one's way through a forest, and the pathway is not necessarily a direct pathway like a highway, but it's just, you know, moving one direction, another direction, and so on. So each of us has that unique pathway where no one of us will, two of us will go through on the same pathway necessarily. And so, as you say, yeah, the goal was to quiet the mind and have that feeling of closeness with Baba. Did I hope I didn't not catch you earlier? Were you here earlier?
Unfortunately, I was not.
Oh, okay, good. I hope I didn't pass over you during the reading.
No.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry that I missed the reading, but
Yeah, it will be on. If you want to, it will be on YouTube. And,
yeah, no, I will listen to it later. Sure.
Yeah, it's
Richard,
funny the way you appear on the webcam. You almost look like Baba. You have a.
There you go.
Yeah.
He made his day.
no,
Yeah.
you're very sensitive to. Thank you. I'm grateful. Yes,
Yeah.
I've noticed that sometimes also.
Uh-huh.
Richard, to make the mind an ally, because you know, I know, we know many people. We know many Baba lovers. We know many people who are Baba likers. Many people who just are living their lives. And there's life, a lot of conflict, a lot of unexpected challenges, a lot of situations personally and professionally and spiritually where one is put in a very challenging set of circumstances. Now, Baba took a certain select group of the folks, the Mandali, on the Blue Bus trip a couple of times. From what I gather, they had the opportunity of a lifetime to deal with letting go. Ego, E-G-O, edging God out. There's Baba, the God man. He loves infinitely. They love him as infinitely as they can. And there they are in the middle of the desert. Scorpions, thieves, cold, all the conditions. So my understanding is he took these people who were ready and he put them through the paces. We also, I believe, get put through the paces on so many ways. And as I've heard the expression, it never ends, or there's always something. The always somethings are not necessarily life or death situations, but having been around Baba people for a long time, I don't sense that they are really keyed on becoming people of peace. Now, that has to do with discernment. I know it even could be judgmental, but in terms of my own quest, I'm looking for the exact question. You know it's off my lips before it even comes, but with all the things that you've gone through, with Baba always with you and in you, there's no magic formula because there's no such thing as magic. Yet, what can you talk about in dealing with the emotional challenges that we all deal with, whether it's, I mean, we all go through all these various, many changes. And I'm wondering, how do you deal with these kinds of emotional vicissitudes?
Well, me personally,
Yeah, because if Baba were alive, if I could speak to Baba, I would be saying to Baba, Baba, you know how our lives have been. You know how we have been in a variety of challenges, and some of them very serious. I won't mention any of them, but you know, some of them are not as serious as others. And then there are periods where life goes on very lovely, and all of a sudden things happen. I'm not so much talking about a parent dying. I'm not so much talking about even a president like we have being in a position of power, and no matter what he does, or no matter what he doesn't do, people die. Whatever he doesn't do, he should do, and whatever he does do, he shouldn't do. I'm not even going to talk about this guy. But my question, and you know the question already, because you're a very sensitive guy, very intuitive. You're not the only one in front of us here, but the little that I know about this is to see my behavior patterns and see what the triggers are, whether it's a person, a situation, and to be like a mental, I call it being a mental martial artist. You're so vigilantly paying attention, which is not easy to do for very long. So when you see that trigger, for example, when I used to work as a school counselor, I would always be on my P's and Q's with my principal, always be on his or her good side, and usually were. However, I can still remember one principal saying the first day of school to a faculty, the first rule in my rule book is kill before being killed. Yes, I saw your expression. And there was not one person in that auditorium of about 50 teachers that stood up and said, Mrs. DeSanto, you may not speak to us that way. You are our principal. We are your faculty. You may not intimidate us. We're here to serve the children. We're here to take your lead. You're our director and our principal. Various challenges happen along the way. To be able to become, in a manner of speaking, shock-proof, which is almost impossible, to be able to see the triggers of people or situations when they arise is what I'm feebly attempting to do, because I know how important it is not to create what we could call negative karma. And I'm of the opinion a lot of karma has to do with the psychological state of one's mind, so that mistakes I've made, I do my best not to repeat them. And everything I can possibly do to come from a place of kindness, gentleness, lovingness, sincerity is very, very important. I guess my question once again is, and I will mention the president. I have him as a challenge, as we all do. I pray, Baba, send him your love, soften his heart, and the leaders of all the world's countries, so that we can somehow come to peace. Baba has set this in motion, I think we all feel, because humanity has to get down on its knees and become human beings again. No war, kindness, all the things we know would be the loving things for humanity to be immersed in. I don't know what Baba would say to me if I would say, Baba, what guidance would you give us in all of the emotional challenges that we have? Yes, it's intended to happen, and yet some people handle it really, really well, and it takes others a longer time to learn how to do that. I'm not talking about externally being peaceful, which is very easy, but on the internal level, how does one accept what is happening day by day by day? Because that becomes our life, by learning how to accept what we may not be so happy that's happening. How do you deal with accepting reality as it is?
Yeah.
Jeff, I
Margaret?
think that
No,
the
If Richard
ahead.
doesn't want to
Go
answer
ahead.
it, let Richard answer it, and then you can
Sure.
answer it. But I'm asking Richard. He's
Okay. Well, I can try and then we'll get a good answer from Marvin. It's I think it's a struggle for all of us. And I don't know of anything other than what Baba has already told us. For me, I guess one of the things I did learn in the process of meditating is the value of tuning into feeling as a way of quieting the mind. And Baba speaks in the discourses about the need to accentuate the heart and to limit the mind. And so the process actually is not an intellectual process, but one of letting go of the intellect and tuning into the heart, tuning into feelings. And so to gain control over those aspects of ourselves, the emotional responses and so on, is to gain more control over those feelings, which normally we're not so conscious of. But if we quiet our mind and allow ourselves to feel things, it's usually the blocking of feeling that causes problems as opposed to allowing the feeling to come through. If the feeling is allowed to come through, it can come through and pass. But if it's blocked, it kind of remains there and festers and continues to maybe jab at us. And so that's maybe one thing I can share, is that the value of not trying to solve it through the intellect, through thinking, but through feeling, which is then also is the avenue to opening up the heart.
Thank you for that very important reminder.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much,
Yeah,
Richard.
sure. Marvin, you want to say something?
Well, I'll just say something very brief. When the difficulties come, or when the emotional situations arrive, my emotions fly off, and sometimes I'm able to catch it a little sooner now than I used to, but we're all struggling with that. But I find that if something major in a negative sense, just accepting it as Baba's will is the absolute best way to get through any deep issue, and know that that Baba has put that in our lives for a reason. And in the end, if we accept it at his will, it will benefit us.
Yeah, Jack?
Based on what I saw of the diagrams that you had, I've always felt, and not I say always in a sense, but eternally, but the last 30 or 40 years, I've really felt that I've been living in a parallel universe. That what I sense with my five senses are something that only I and nobody else senses, experiences. And in this parallel universe, God, Baba, your God, my God, has always been with me. And I try very seriously and in depth, because I think about this when I'm laying down at night, to maintain, as Jeff mentioned, a sense of equilibrium or equipoise. And don't put right or wrong on anything. Just do what you do. What I don't do is be concerned about what I didn't do, or who cares? I don't. Because what I'm doing at the time is what I do, and it then harkens back to my talking with Mani about free will back in 1972. And she told me, quite frankly, when she asked Bob about that, Bob said there isn't any free will, but humanity is not ready for it yet. And that has been a sense of comfort for me, Yeah, I'll screw up, objectively and subjectively. But to me, for whatever reason, beyond my ability to comprehend, it was meant for me to do that. So I try not to let that keep me from, what's the great two words? Oh yeah, these days, moving forward. But I know that I'm just going around in a circle. So there's so many things that we could spend the rest of our existence on this planet in this form, trying to grasp the completeness of all of this, which is not meant for us to grasp the completeness of this until that time comes. So it's a waiting game, and it's always a quest to, for me, to feel comfortable in the fact that I'll never be comfortable, and have the patience, which Baba said is the most difficult of all of the emotions that last. That's the one emotion that lasts up until the very end of our journey as an atma back to ourselves, is patience. So that's my miserable 2 cents.
Not miserable, it's beautiful. Very beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you, Jack. Yeah.
You're welcome.
I'm going to say Jai Baba, folks. I got to go. Thanks
Thank you,
for
Marvin.
having me, Richard.
Okay, Marvin, good to see you.
Thank
Good
you,
to see
Marvin, for your
everybody.
Hey,
thoughts.
Baba.
Thank
Good to
you,
see you.
Marvin, very much. Jai Baba, Marvin.
Jai
Bye,
Baba.
Marvin.
Bye, Marge.
Me too.
Thank you, Richie. That was wonderful. Thanks for your contributions, Jeff.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you very much.
Jai Baba, see you next time.
Jai Baba.
All right.
All right. Stay safe.
Sure.
Were you going to say more, Richie?
No, just good to see you, Marge,
You too.
and Jay Baba to you.
Jai Baba. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Me too. We're off and running.
All right. Hi,
Where?
Jack.
Girls.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks for your sharing, Jay Baba.
All right. No, I did.
You just did?
Just now.
Okay, well, just about our time is finished, but Jeff, you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for answering my questions from your
Yeah.
heart and your experience and the way Baba would, speak through you. And I look forward to listening to you again and maybe chatting when the opportunity presents itself. Really,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, nice. I don't know if we've met in the past, but nice to meet you through Zoom.
We haven't. This is the first time.
Okay, yeah. Well, nice to meet you.
Jai Baba, thank you so much, Richard.
Thank you. Okay, you're welcome. Thank you for joining, Jay Baba.
Jai Baba.